Two statements stood out today. Hoes long to die in the cold, and Karen was just a babysitter with benefits. Thank you for joining me for a recap of Day 16 in the Karen Read trial. Welcome to the Roundup, True Crime with Mike. Here I give you an update to current cases so you can quickly catch up on today's or this week's happenings on some public cases. Today we heard from 4 witnesses, with 2 of them talking about what happened that morning at the Alberts house, and 2 witnesses talking about an interaction they had with John and Karen in Aruba over the previous New Year's holiday trip. Let's start with the finishing of Jenn McCabe's testimony. The day started with her being on cross, and here is one of the first exchanges.
I didn't tell Sergeant Lank that my client said I hit him. What you said was that my client said, I hope I didn't hit him. Correct?
No.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Jackson was asking Jenn about the exact phrase that Karen said to her about hitting John, and if it was a statement or a question. Then they went on to discuss several other topics. Jackson asked why she went over to the Proctor house and talked with the wife Elizabeth, and Jenn brought up the harassment that they have been receiving in the aftermath of the incident. She talked about how her family, and others were harassed, with people showing up at her house, at events, and even described something sent to her daughter with something gross on it. Jackson tried to object before she could talk about it, but the judge said he brought it in. Then we got back to the infamous Google search of "Hoes long to die cold," followed by a second search of "How long to die in the cold." Jenn's story is that Karen told her to search that while John was being looked at. She said she was cold and trembling, and hence the misspellings. Jackson brought up the time frames about it actually being at 2:27 a.m., and she did the second search just to cover for the first search. Jackson finished his first cross, and then came the redirect from Lally. He first started talking about how Life 360 isn't always correct, and sometimes it's off, which Jenn agreed with. Then the horrified statement that people wanted to hear. This is from Kerry when talking to officers, but it was allowed even though it was hearsay. Let's listen to the clip.
The door has been opened, Mr. Jackson. That means you can answer.
Okay. So basically, Kerry is a talker, and once she started...
I think just focus on
Okay.
what she said.
Okay. She said something like, John really loved Amy, and in my eyes, Karen was just a babysitter with benefits.
This goes to motive for Karen to want to kill John. Did she think John was just using her? Lally finished the redirect asking Jenn what she did career-wise, and she was a 5th grade teacher. He was inferring whether Jenn could even know how to delete a Google search. Next came Kerry Roberts to the stand. She is a friend of John O'Keefe and later Karen Read. She was not at the waterfall or the Alberts that night, and she is not related to anyone here. She describes getting the first call.
Right around 5 a.m. and can you describe to the jury sort of what the content of that conversation was?
I answered the phone and she said, John's dead. Kerry, Kerry, Kerry. And then she hung up.
And as far as her end of the conversation, did you say anything or get a chance to say anything before she hung up?
No.
And when she's speaking to you and saying those words to you over the phone, how loudly is she saying those words?
Very loud. She woke my husband, who was sleeping.
For the time.
So Kerry says John is dead, and then we get this.
I tried to call her, I think a couple times back to be like, what is going on? Finally, she called me back again, and she said, I'm afraid John might be dead. He might have gotten hit by a plow. He did not come home last night. I was not supposed to stay in Canton last night, and he would never leave Kaylee alone. I think something happened.
Kerry says that Karen told her that a snowplow hit John. She then talks about how they drove to John's house and that the garage was down and that the code had been changed. On the way leaving from the house, Kerry says that Karen pointed out that she also broke a taillight. Then they drove to the Fairview house, and she starts crying on the stand as the dash cam from the police car brings back her memories. She says as they got to the driveway, Karen says, "There is John over there, even though Kerry and Jenn didn't see John. Kerry describes the frantic scene as paramedics arrive and other people arrive. Kerry talks about sitting in the car with Karen, and Karen says, "I'm going to kill myself and you need to take care of the kids." Kerry says that she then leaves to pick up other people, and then the cops called her because Karen's parents called in for a suicide worry, so Kerry comes back. Kerry then describes driving people to the hospital. She describes seeing the body with the puffy eyes and the scratched forearms. It was very sad. Kerry says she talked to the officers at Jenn's house, and the officers took her and Jenn's phones to clone. There was no cross on Kerry. Next up were two sisters who went to Aruba with Jenn and Karen during New Year's about a month prior to the incident. First, she describes how she was pregnant and her boyfriend at the time committed suicide, and how John became the godfather to her son. Then she talked about her trip and the incident that occurred. She described running into John one night and Karen was blowing up his phone. She said that John told him that Karen thought he had been making out with Laura's sister. Laura asked John, "Are you happy?" His answer was, "It is what it is." The cross on Laura was just asking if she was involved that night. Then came her sister Marietta. Marietta described going to Aruba with Karen and John, and when she met Karen, all they did was exchange FUs to each other. Again, Cross was just asking if Marietta was there that night, and both had said no. There is no court tomorrow because there is a hearing for Turtle Boy in the afternoon. Friday will be a full day. Brian Higgins will be on the stand on Friday, and I think it will be a full day with just him. One good quote I have heard a few times is, "It seems like people are watching two different trials." We will see how Friday goes.